when it comes to the offerings. And why do I say that the concept of how we relate to the korbanot, the offerings in the Holy Temple, is like an acid test of who we are in our relationship with Hashem and how we understand the Torah? Because we have a phenomena where there are people that may consider themselves to be, and they may indeed be very, very deeply rooted in Torah faith. And they may feel very motivated to sanctify Hashem's name and to study the Torah and to keep all of the mitzvot. But when it comes to the issue of the offerings in the temple, it's like something happens and there's a line that's being drawn. I can't go there. They say, I can't go there. That has to have been then. But it can't be now because it's primitive. And aren't there rabbis who say, well, that was then, but I heard there were rabbis who say that that was a facilitation of the people at that time who needed to be weaned from paganity. But now, in our modern age, with everything that we've gained as people, technology and wisdom, we certainly won't be going back to that. People will be very quick to latch on to these things and to distance themselves from this part of the Torah. For many of us, it becomes almost a liability, an embarrassment, an albatross hanging around our neck. If it wouldn't be for the book of Leviticus, they say, to themselves maybe, and sometimes out loud, if it wouldn't be for this whole part of the Torah, I'd feel so great about being a Jew. I'd feel so great about believing in the Torah. Look at the Jewish people, how much they've accomplished. Look at their values. Look at how much they've contributed to society. But this is like the dark corner. It can't be. This is very, very ironic because the father of the Jewish people, of course, is Abraham. And our sages stress to us that much of the guidelines, the structure, the outline, the criteria necessary for fulfilling an offering in the Holy Temple, much of what needs to be included when bringing an offering in the Holy Temple is derived from the experience of Abraham at the Akedah. In other words, our sages tell us that when Abraham brought Isaac to the altar, all of those circumstances that he fulfilled and everything that went through him and everything that, all those feelings that pulled him apart, that's what it is to bring an offering in the Holy Temple. That's what a korban is all about. And we understand the whole dynamic of standing by the altar through our father Abraham. So let's look at what that was all about. You know, many people erroneously understand Abraham's challenge to have been the fact that, you know, he was childless his entire life. At the age of 100, miraculously, impossibly, his wife gives birth to a child. God promises him that this child, his only son, who he loves, Yitzchak, will be the legacy, the heir. He will carry through with the promise of the Jewish people. And then God tells him inexplicably a commandment. Now I want you to take him, the one I told you about, the one that you love, the only one, Yitzchak, yes, the heir, the legacy, thank you, the one who is going to be continuing your line. I changed my mind. I want you to take him and slaughter him up for me as an offering. And everybody thinks this must have been a tremendous cataclysmic upheaval for Avraham. But that's not the only aspect of what he was going through. Another aspect of what he was going through is the idea that he made a career out of teaching the whole world that this very thing is absolutely abhorrent to God and that he would never ask such a thing, and that all the pagans that are into human sacrifice and doing this type of thing are not pleasing to the Almighty. This is exactly what his campaign was all about, in single-handedly bringing the world to the recognition of the one true God and how to serve him. So now, he has a journey before him. It's a 3-day journey. He's traveling throughout the countryside, meeting up with a lot of the constituents whom he influenced to abandon their idolatry and their pagan ways and rites. And they must be asking him, where are you going? What are you doing? And he has to explain to them, I'm going to slaughter my son. The very opposite of everything that he knew to be true and that he taught. But this was the will of God. And that is what the test on the deepest level was really all about. Nothing necessarily has to make sense to us except Hashem's will. And that's the idea of that prayer, may my will become your will, may your will become my will. And this is the core of everything that Avraham Avinu was going through. So now today, in any forum where we may be discussing the importance of the offerings, we will have people expressing their opinions about how uncomfortable it makes them feel. And clearly, the offerings in the Holy Temple are a challenge to society's comfort zone. And what remains for us to really analyze and understand and approach is what is the comfort zone of society? And has society changed all that much from the days of the Holy Temple? Indeed, from the days of the Exodus from Egypt to our world today in 2010. I think we're going to find many parallels that challenge us to be uncomfortable, to do the will of Hashem, to show that indeed it is Hashem who is in control and who runs the world and who prioritizes and who has chosen us, first and foremost, who has chosen man above the animals, and secondly, who has chosen Israel to be the light that brings that message to all mankind. And so opinions are expressed that this seems to be a very primitive thing. It seems to be almost barbaric, and people will say this. How can we call any of the commandments of the Torah primitive? How can we define any of Hashem's mitzvot as barbaric? As if to say that we human beings today are capable of more compassion or greater understanding or have a deeper heart than the will of Hashem himself. Rather, humility behooves us to admit that our intellect, which indeed was itself created by Hashem, is not necessarily capable of understanding immediately the secret of what this is really all about. And so the acid test really that I'm referring to is the idea of what this is all about in our world today, what it signifies, what it brings us to, the recognition, the acknowledgement, the experience, and how to plug all of this into our world today. What it really boils down to is the role of man in the world versus the role of the rest of creation. And are we willing to accept that upon ourselves? Man is called upon to be higher than the animals. Man is called upon to change himself. And this is maybe part of why the issue is so sensitive, because it makes us confront our deepest secrets. It makes us confront who we really are. And we get into a certain kind of defensive mode where we think, this can't be talking to me. It has to be outdated. It has to be something that, rather than say that I don't understand, it has to be something which doesn't need to be understood. This is the tendency that we have as people. But if we understand that everything in the Torah is eternal, that it's the word of Hashem, that it's for the betterment, for the good of mankind, that it's, as our sages tell us, one of the central pillars that upholds the entire universe, then we can begin to understand that there's something going on here which involves huge forces, which involves upheaval of spirits and emotion and intellect for people to go through in order to really bring about a rectification of who we are as people. And this is really one of the primary goals of the service of the Korbanot, bringing the offerings in the Holy Temple. So all the voices that we hear today that are deriding and detracting. We really have to understand what the Torah's message is, and maybe look at our world and understand where we are. Are we lost? Because one of the things that the offerings comes to do is to allow us to find ourselves again. You know, one of the things that people say today is that the Holy Temple sounds like just one big slaughterhouse. But the truth is, the world today, without the Holy Temple, and without these primal forces being rectified and identified and elevated to a sense of divine purpose, the whole world today is one big slaughterhouse. And the concept of the offerings in the Holy Temple is designed to bring the family of man back to God and to elevate all of existence, to understand man's role in the world. And we're going to continue on Light to the Nations and see how this affects us directly with the Passover offering, source of joy, the very identity of the Jewish people.